What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you a video on the brand new Flundereeze Archetype, which is an archetype set to release in the next core set after Dawn of Majesty, Burst of Destiny. That means we're probably not going to get these cards till the end of 2021, but this archetype looks very interesting, and that's why I wanted to bring you guys this video today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. The first monster here is Flundereeze Eglen. So it's a level 10 Wing Beast effect monster, 2700 attack, 1000 defense. If this card is tribute summoned, you can add one Flundereeze spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one monster. While this tribute summon monster is on the field, your opponent's special summon monsters in attack position cannot activate their effect. So this is almost like a Baguska sort of effect, but the fact that it affects special summon monsters in attack position means that it works specifically with link monsters, and that's a really big deal. And the third effect, if this card battles an opponent's monster during damage calculation, you can banish one card from your hand. That opponent's monster's current attack and defense become halved until the end of this turn. That last effect's pretty irrelevant, but I think the part to note here is the second effect, which is a pretty nice stun effect on a sort of win condition for the deck. And the first effect, the fact that you get to add a spell or trap from deck to hand, and you can immediately normal summon a monster after that effect resolves. That's going to be a common theme with the Flundereeze cards here. So interesting little boss monster. Also, the artwork is adorable because it's a bunch of penguins. Let's go ahead and move on to the next card here, though, which is Flundereeze Snowl. I guess Snow Owl is what we're going for here. Level 10 Water Wing Beast effect monster, 2900 attack, 800 defense. Once per turn, if you control this tribute summon card, you can activate this effect. You can conduct 3 normal summons or sets this turn, not just one. That is insane. I mean, we're not really strangers in Yu-Gi-Oh! To additional normal summons. Obviously, we've had cards in the past like Gem Knight Seraphinite that allow us to get an extra normal summon, but 3 normal summons? That's quite a bit. And I imagine this is just going to be a tribute summon focused archetype, which may restrict some of our ability to special summon, but I think that's kind of just how the game goes nowadays. Second effect, while this tribute summon monster is on the field, if your monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. Okay, that's fine. Third effect, once per opponent's turn, quick effect, you can banish one card from your hand, change all opponent's special summon monsters to face down defense position. So this is almost like an ultimate conductor Tyranno sort of effect. It only affects opponent's special summon monsters, and it also doesn't include link monsters because of course link monsters can't get flipped face down. However, there are a lot of decks that don't play link monsters, and pretty much every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Special summons, let's be honest. So that's a pretty good way to just stun your opponent out of the game and make it so that you can take over, and that also makes the second effect a little bit better because then on the following turn you can attack all their defense position monsters, maybe get in some damage. I think that's just a little bit of a bonus if anything. But 3 normal summons and an ultimate conductor Tyranno effect in one card. This archetype is looking very good right out of the gate. The biggest question is, though, will we be able to facilitate these bigger monsters? Let's go ahead and find out, because next up is Flundereeze Robina. It looks like it's a robin, but it's a level 1 Water Wing Beast effect monster, 600 attack, 1200 defense. You can only use the first and third effects of this card's name once per turn. Also, you cannot special summon the turn you activate either of those effects. So here's what I was alluding to. I imagine with an archetype like this, they were going to have some restrictions here because otherwise it would just be crazy. And it makes sense, right? A lot of archetypes that force you into tribute summoning as the main mechanic restrict you from special summoning a lot of the time. So it's really not a surprise. First effect, if this card is normal summon, you can add a level 4 lower wing beast monster from your deck to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one wing beast monster. Wow, so you even get even more normal summons in addition to all of this. That's just crazy. This is also like just generic support. It doesn't have to specifically be a Flundereeze card, so that gives you some more open-ended ability to splash other cards in this deck. Interesting. Second effect, if this face-up card leaves the field, banish it. And third effect, if a wing beast monster is normal summoned to your field while this card is banished, you can add this card to your hand. So that means that if you summon any of the other monsters that we're probably going to get to here, you can normal summon them, immediately get this back. Then on the following turn, you have a follow-up play, because since you can immediately normal summon a winged beast after this first effect resolves, then you're going to be able to just recycle it over and over again, and that way you have a bit of a resource loop there. That's pretty good. As long as you're able to continuously get the card back efficiently enough, that's a great way to just continuously keep adding cards to your hand. And so that's a pretty good starter. Let's go ahead and see what else we got. Next up is Flundereeze Eglen. It's a level 1 wind wing beast effect monster, 800 attack, 1000 defense. You can only use the first first and third effects once per turn each. Also, you cannot special summon the turn you activate either of those effects. If this card is normal summon, you can add one level 7 or higher winged beast monster from your deck to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one winged beast monster. This allows you to go higher and get to our bigger monsters here, which makes these searchable now, which is much better than just having to hard draw them. And again, it's open-ended, right? It's any level 7 or higher winged beast. That means you can use any of the winged beasts in the card pool. Some of them could be pretty useful, so that means you could splash some other cards in here as well. Second effect, if this face-up card leaves the field, banish it. And third effect, if a winged beast monster is normal summoned to your field while this card is banished, you can add this card to your hand. So it's the same clause as the first one here. So you could just simply go normal summon this, you know, add this to your hand, then normal summon this as well, and immediately you have two monsters on the field, and you also can immediately normal summon again after this. So it's like they just turn normal summoning into special summoning, but without calling it special summoning, and actually restricting you from special summoning in the process. Obviously, this isn't too new. If you look at older decks like Monarchs or True Draco, they are no stranger to bestowing you with additional normal or tribute summons, but it's just a new way to do it that really hasn't been done before, I would say. Pretty neat though, pretty neat. Continuing on along, we have Flundereeze Stritch. I love the artwork on this because you have this pissed off ostrich, and this bird is like, fuck that, I'm out of here, bro, see ya. But pretty cool artwork. The artwork's interesting. It's definitely a unique style that really isn't, it's Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's like a very different way than we're used to seeing with Yu-Gi-Oh. And I kind of like it, but it's also very brown, so a lot of these cards kind of look the same. So I really don't like that, but it's funny. The bird's expressions are probably what saves it. But Stritch is a level 1 winged beast effect monster with 700 attack, 1100 defense. You can only use the first and third effects once per turn each, and you can't special summon the turn you activate them. If it's normal summon, you can target a card in either graveyard, banish it, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one winged beast monster. If this face-up card leaves the field, banish it, and if a winged beast monster is normal summoned to your field while this card is banished, you can add this card to your hand. So this is probably the weakest of the three little ones we've seen so far. Being able to banish something in your opponent's graveyard's pretty good, but I mean, you're doing it on your turn, and I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks of this card. This doesn't really give you any advantage. It's kind of taking advantage away from your opponent. I guess you could banish one of your own cards to then potentially get it back, so there is some synergy there as well, but I think this is one of the weaker cards we've seen thus far, but it's okay. If there's a way to get this out on your opponent's turn, then that would be pretty nice. Next up, though, is Flundereeze Toucan, and this toucan just looks like he's drunk out of his mind. I mean, just the artwork on these cards is so silly. I love it. It's so adorable. Also, just look at the little bird here. He's so cute, but I digress. We're going to get back to the actual effect. Level 1 winged beast effect monster, 500 attack, 1300 defense, wind attribute. You can only use the first and third effects once per turn, and you can't special summon the turn you activate either effects. If it's normal summon, you can target a banished Flundereeze card and add it to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a winged beast monster. So this one's definitely better than the Stritch, I would say, because it is giving you resources. I would say it's still worse than both the Eglen as well as the Robin, because it has to require a little bit of setup before you can do this. Not a lot, but I wouldn't say it's as good as those other ones, and so you may not play as many of this because of that. Second effect, if it leaves the field, banish it, and if a winged beast monster is normal summon your field while it's banished, you can add this card to your hand. The fact that all of these just recur themselves is crazy, because then you're able to just go off and just get them all back and then just set up again the next turn. That's very, very powerful, and I feel like that's going to make this deck highly competitive. I mean, just looking at the makings of this is the bones of something competitive, right? This just seems very pushed. Moving on along, though, to the spells. Looks like we have a field spell to kick things off, and again, the art on these cards is so interesting. I like how it's like the bird is holding the map because you can see the little wing here, or it's like pointing out where they're going. That's kind of cute. But it is Flundereeze and the Mysterious Map. That sounds like a Disney movie. It is a field spell. You can only use the first and second effects once per turn each. During your main phase, you can reveal one level 1 Flundereeze monster in your hand, and if you do, banish a Flundereeze card with a different name from your deck. Then immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon the revealed monster. So this is pretty good. It's not like a direct +1 in terms of card advantage, but what you could do is hypothetically, you could like banish one of these and then normal summon the other, and then because it's banished and you normal summon, you could add it to your hand. So that's actually a way to generate advantage off of this card, but it does require you to go through a bit of steps, and it does require you to have another level 1 in your hand. Otherwise, it's not really going to do much at all. The second effect, though, if your opponent normal summons a monster, you can immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one Flundereeze monster. Okay, so this is actually interesting because this is a way to trigger the Stritch during the opponent's turn and then act as a sort of graveyard interruption, but it does require your opponent to normal summon, right? And obviously your opponent opponent is going to only have one normal summon unless you're playing the mirror match, right? And so that is still pretty decent and allows you to get some advantage back during your turn, because at the very least, if any of the small ones are banished, you can trigger them by getting them back to your hand. That's not too bad, but again, it does require some conditional setup and the opponent has to actually play into it. It's not like it's a trap card and you can flip it on your opponent when they normal summon. They know that this is going to be out and they know that this can potentially happen. It's not like the best field spell I've ever read, but it's actually pretty good. It's decent. But let's go ahead and move on though. We have a continuous spell next, Flundereeze and the Unknown Wind, and it looks like the Disney movie names keep on going. This artwork is very beautiful though. That's a very pretty card. You can only use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. The first effect reads, you can conduct a tribute summon that requires 2 tributes by sending 1 monster you control and 1 card your opponent controls to the graveyard instead of tributing. That is insane that you can tribute your opponent's card to use that for a tribute summon, not monster cards. So that gives it just a wider breadth of possibilities there, because you can tribute away their back row. And I mean, I guess they're going to see it coming because this is a continuous spell and you have to play it down, but that's very good. That is insanely strong. And the second effect, during your main phase, you can reveal up to 2 winged beast monsters in your hand and place them on the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw the same number of cards. This is giving me Cosmo Town sort of vibes here. We see effects like this every once in a while, and that's not bad. The fact that you just get to cycle 2 cards away is pretty decent. Again, it's not going to come up all the time, but just this first effect here, if you're going second, and the fact that you can tribute away anything your opponent has, that's insanely strong. I don't know if it's exactly Monarch Stormforth level of strong, but like the fact that it's in archetype and we can actually search it, because the first card here, the M-Pen, we're able to get any Flundereeze spell or trap. That's pretty decent. I believe now we're moving on to the trap cards, and first up is Flundereeze and the City of Dreams, and this is just an adorable artwork. I mean, look, they're all sleeping and they have like sleeping caps on. That's so cute. The card effect is a normal trap, and it reads, during the main phase, immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a level 4 lower winged beast monster. Okay, so again, this allows you to trigger the Stritch. This allows you to trigger any of your other monsters that are banished to get them back to your hand. Not terrible. The second effect, which you can only use once per turn, if you tribute summon a level 7 or higher monster while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, change all monsters your opponent controls to face down defense position. So this is very similar to the second boss monster here that has a similar effect. And so you have to use this during your opponent's turn to basically tribute for one of the bigger monsters. It just has to be a level 7 or higher. It doesn't have to be a Flundereeze, so do keep that in mind. But then if this is in the graveyard, you can banish it and then switch everything your opponent has face down. That can be good for stopping synchro plays, for stopping Xyz plays, even Link plays by extension if they haven't gone into Link monsters yet. That's not bad. It definitely does require a lot of setup, I would say, and so it is a little bit conditional in that regard. This card is searchable with the main penguin, so that could matter. You could just set up the penguin in this, then during your opponent's turn, flip this up, tribute for the other one, and then you can just banish this to flip everything face down. You also have the fact that if you tribute summon for this one specifically, you can flip everything down twice, potentially, if they start playing through whatever you did for the initial disruption. But I mean, I think it's a little bit optimistic, but you may play this just because of the first effect anyway, to tribute summon, or rather normal summon during your opponent's turn, because you get a lot of value back off of that. And plus, since you search it, you don't have to play a lot of this card anyway. It's an interesting card. This one requires a bit more thought, but it's definitely not that bad. And then the last card here, I believe, is a counter trap, Flundereeze and the Scary Sea. Very, very cool artwork again. I love, the more I'm seeing this, I'm starting to like the art style more in the spells and traps than the actual monsters. Just the color scheme and everything's really cool. The effect is a counter trap, and it says you can only activate it once per turn. If you control a face-up tribute summon monster and no special summon monsters, and your opponent would special summon a monster or monsters, your opponent cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, but they can conduct 3 normal summon or sets this turn, not just 1. Also, negate the summon, and if you do, return that monsters to the hand. What is this card? This card is insane. You want to talk about a payoff? Okay, so in the most basic, simplistic sense with this deck, you can go normal Robin, add the Eagle, normal the Eagle off of the Robin's effect. Eagle can then add the Penguin. You can tribute both of those for the Penguin, and then Penguin triggers, adding the counter trap to hand. You can just set the counter trap and just pass, okay? You flip this up, you Vanity's Emptiness them, and then you negate the summon of the monster on top of it. that is just like game winning. That is just game winning in and of itself. And that's like the most simplistic play pattern that this deck has. That is nuts. That is so good. Almost every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Requires you to special summon to some significant degree. That's how the game works. Special summoning is the new normal summon, but this card basically makes it so that it's able to compete, because I don't know how decks are supposed to beat this. If you make it so that you Vanity's Emptiness them for the turn, like, that's just game winning. Most decks are gonna fold to that. And this part right here about them conducting 3 normal summons or sets, what the hell are decks going to do with normal summons without being able to go into the extra deck? Maybe they can get a little bit of setup, but they're not going to be able to do a whole lot. And not to mention, that was just like a 1-card combo that you did to get to just that counter trap. Think about the other 4 cards you're going to have in your hand to build the rest of your board, and you're still going to have a 2700 attack point monster on the field that they have to contest with. And if this sits, then you can still do everything else that this deck is capable of doing. This deck is crazy. I think this is a tier 1 deck. When Burst of Destiny becomes legal, I think this is going to be a tier 1 contender, because this just seems very, very pushed. It seems very unfair, and I'm struggling to think of what decks are going to do to actually beat this. I guess the biggest way to beat this is that if you're going second and playing this deck, it may be a more difficult time for you because you're not going to be able to set up the counter trap going first. But the fact that you have built-in floodgates to your strategy, hell, even some of the cards are able to interact with your opponent during their turn. I think there's ways in deck building that you could solve that weakness of this deck. Typically, the tribute summon decks are much better going first. Let's be honest, most decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are. But this archetype seems very, very pushed, very, very powerful, and I think this is going to be meta-worthy. I'm also quite aware of the weaknesses of this deck, because if you hit the first normal summon with like an effect veiler or infinite impermanence, that could be enough to shut down the turn entirely. And so through deck building, players are going to have to figure out a way to compensate for that. But they're releasing a ton of generic Wing Beast support at the moment, and so there could be ways to work around that. This archetype seems strong enough, and it seems like it has the right tools that would push people to want to figure out how to make this deck good, because more often than not, if you're able to resolve that counter trap, you're probably just going to win the game 9 times out of 10, and it's in archetype, right? It's not like you're playing a deck and then just splashing in 3 copies of Sanctum and Scythe like some decks do. The counter trap is searchable, right? And that's what makes it so much more appealing, and that's why I think that this deck could truly be a meta contender. Maybe I'm just overhyping it, but this seems like one of the better archetypes we've seen from Konami in quite some time, and that makes me really excited to see what people are going to do with it. But it also makes me dread what's going to happen when this archetype comes out, because man, losing to that counter trap is going to suck. And who knows, typically in the OCG they figure out if these decks are viable or not, and then us TCG players can see that because they get the cards several months in advance. But we'll have to see. I think there's a lot of potential here. I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments, because this archetype looks sweet, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you all so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to both the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Yu-Gi-Oh! Progression series. Thanks so much again, and we will see you next time.